Hello everyone, and welcome to the first of two community DefCore reviews today. It's the same topic, we're just doing the meetings twice. You are the first, and thereby guinea pigs, for this topic. And there's a lot of material to cover, and I definitely want to get to a point where we have community input. So with everybody's patience, I'll pause for a minute to get questions up front, but what I would ask is, let me run through the what is DefCore and where we are pretty quickly, so that we can get to a point where where we actually have enough information for everybody to start asking questions and understanding where things are. Can people see my screen? And so some of this is based on a presentation that Josh and I gave. There's a ton of material here. And this was a 45-minute presentation. You're welcome to go back and do that, look at that at your leisure. And there's also a lot of Etherpad, wiki materials here around the DefCore committee and the principles and things like that we have staked out. Okay, and our goal ultimately is to get to, I'm going to share my whole screen. I'm sorry if it causes resolution crimes on your side. Our goal is to ultimately talk about this matrix. So, and the tests that are scored in green, yellow, and red here. So DefCore, very quickly, is an ongoing committee for the board that is specifically tasked with creating and running the process that defines what is OpenStack Core. The reason OpenStack Core is important is because we're looking for ways to create interoperability between OpenStack clouds, which means that our focus here is on the vendor side. So DefCore is about commercial use of the OpenStack brand, specifically targeted at driving interoperability between OpenStack products, which means both hosted services, private cloud, and then also helping grow the ecosystem by allowing people in our ecosystem to have a more consistent target for what their products are. So there's without a doubt a commercial angle to DefCore, and it's really important to understand what that is, or that it's like that. And it's based on I'll go in the flow here. The way we've set up DefCore after a lot of process and discussion is that it's based on principles, and we'll talk through these principles a little bit. But fundamentally, our goal is to have very transparent ways we make decisions and why we make decisions a certain way that are vetted in the community. The purpose of this meeting is not so much to review those principles, but to actually talk about the impacts of those decisions. And so I'll refer you to places where we talk about the principles. And I will jump back to what this slide is, because this ends up being really important. But there's specific principles chart in here, and then there's criteria that we use to determine what core is. And so what the result is, when we look at DefCore, there are two critical components for DefCore. Designated sections of code and must-pass capabilities. And I'm going to produce a graphic that helps explain this. The must-pass capabilities are effectively what we've done is we've taken, let me show you the PDF on this, we've taken all of the tests for Havana, and right now we're talking about Havana. This will be applied in an advisory way in Havana to allow vendors to start understanding the process, and then we're going to start enforcing this for Icehouse, hopefully after the Paris summit, and then as quickly as possible Juno. There's going to be some growing pains as we start actually enforcing these. But what we did was we took the universe of tests in Tempest and we blocked them into capabilities. that was done initially by Troy Tolman and the DefCore, but we expect the community to own, the technical community to own which tests are grouped into which capabilities, and then provide friendlier names and descriptions for what these capabilities are. But the idea here is that we've taken all of OpenStack, all of Tempest. Eventually the test could be broader, but all of Tempest, taking those tests, block them into capabilities that define specific endpoints. And you'll see some capabilities have a lot of tests in them, some have relatively few tests in them. And then we scored each capability based on as much objective criteria as we could have. None of these criteria is totally objective, but we ended up with 12 scoring criteria that are laid out here. And there's 4 major areas of those criteria. We could spend a lot of time. I could spend a whole hour. We took hours and hours coming up with what these criteria are. But the belief is that they actually describe the community's goals in multiple facets about what we're trying to achieve with core. And so the goal is that by scoring these capabilities, we've identified the critical interoperable, smallest interoperable set to make an OpenStack cloud successful. And then we expect commercial vendors to have these capabilities and validate that they have the capabilities by passing the tests. So this isn't, hey, we want you to do this, and please, it would be really cool if it's, we have tests, you pass the tests for these capabilities, you can call yourself OpenStack. And that's really supposed to be a very concrete thing. And we've had this baked into the bylaws all along. In the bylaws, it was called FITS testing. Faithful implementation is what that means. However, we've been growing this a little bit, and we found that people really like the capabilities definition because it helps actually describe what you can expect an OpenStack cloud to do. So the capabilities themselves are not sufficient in the community's perspective on making an OpenStack cloud an OpenStack cloud. If we did that, it would be an API-only definition of OpenStack, and going back in OpenStack's history, that is not considered sufficient. OpenStack is software, as Jonathan Bryce is very fond of saying, and so what we've done in the DefCore process is we said you must have these capabilities and demonstrate that you have them by passing the tests, and you must also have certain components of the upstream project in your product. And there's a ordering in this case. If you have, there might be projects with designated, what we call designated sections. These are the required parts of the code. That there might be projects with designated sections but no required capabilities. In those cases, it doesn't matter. The first filter is that you have a required capability. So if Nova has required capabilities, then the vendors are also expected to use the designated components of Nova in their products also. If you have a project, and hold on, and so we get this graph to help explain this. The OpenStack is the top right. So you have a project that has that you have a product that is using the designated code and passes the test. That is OpenStack. If you use the designated code but don't pass the tests, we would consider that misconfigured. If you don't do either, you're not OpenStack. And if you pass the tests but don't use the designated code, then that's a whole different conversation that we will have in the future. But there's my other slide for this. It comes down later. So I'll jump into these examples. What we're saying is that there's some places where if you have a project that doesn't have required tests, required capabilities, but you use the project and use the designated sections, that's great. We want to encourage people to pick up projects that don't yet have required capabilities. Horizon, Trove, most of the projects don't have required capabilities, but you can use them, and it's important to know which parts of those projects are designated and which ones aren't, so that can shape your use. In this slide, I call that earning OpenStack karma. So it's important to understand when we talk about designated sections have gotten some interest lately. What we're really trying to do is we're talking about designated sections for projects that have core capabilities. And it's possible for a project to have a core capability but have no designated sections. Keystone is the least contentious example of that, where we know commercial implementations of OpenStack have run with 0 of Keystone, except API compatibility. And one of the things the board is discussing in the next couple of weeks is that okay or not? And that's actually that'll be a specific topic at the next board meeting and the September board meeting also. And I'm happy to discuss it today. I'm trying to tee up what those discussions are. It's obviously much more contentious when it comes to Swift, and we start talking about whether or not Swift is included in that set. Because in the scoring that we've had, so this spreadsheet is our first pass at building a scoring algorithm. We are working on more user-friendly scoring sheets. This is part of our evolution, so please be patient. If you're interested in translating that, I actually built a cheat sheet, and if you Google for DefCore cheat sheet, you'll find this, and it highlights out what all the different fields and things like that mean. But fundamentally, this is the capability on the left. And the names, while not particularly descriptive, are functional enough for us to understand what they are. They're usually prefixed by the area, so compute is Nova, object store is Swift, identity is Keystone, images is Glance. Pretty straightforward to do it. And the scores that are in green are the items that we consider required capabilities. So in this scoring, we took our 12 criteria. We said it must be a non-admin API. We consider admin APIs to be not core at this point. And the 0.5s are placeholders for things that are to be scored. But even with 0.5s, it was very clear that we had a nice gap between in the 70 range. So we use 75 as a cutoff. And then these became the required capabilities for Havana. The ones on the bubble are ones that we expect the community to track as potentially added in the next cycle, and the ones in red are ones that we see as having gaps as far as a core capability. And then scoring this ends up being an exercise of a team. It's sitting down, and once you get used to what the scores mean, it takes a couple of minutes per capability to score it. And we expect the scores to roll forward. And part of what I know if you haven't watched this process before, I'm asking people to interpret these results without much analysis. It is okay. This isn't your only bite at the apple for feedback. The purpose here is to expose you to what we're doing, show you where it's going, and if you're having a toxic reaction to volume snapshots being a core capability, you can do some research and bring it up on the list, or we can talk about it here. And if you're very upset that Networks VPN is clearly out, then actually all of the neutron pieces are out in this scoring. Then you can talk about why that is and how that works. I will note that conversations about that need to be grounded in the scoring criteria. We can have philosophical arguments about why things come back or forth, but the reason we did the criteria is because we wanted to have some more quantitative assessment rather than telling everybody shouting at each other because their favorite capability was not in. Okay. I think I've covered all the material. I'm not going to go. We actually went through and talked about some specific implications of what these tests are with different code coverage, and we talked about some other technologies in this presentation. This is my Atlanta Summit presentation, and it's almost identical to what I'm going to be giving at OSCON. So there's plenty of chances to go revisit that. All right, I'm 15 minutes in. I've covered a lot of ground. I'm pausing for questions and comments. I can barely hear you. Is that? Okay, that's better. Yes, much better. Sure. Compute volumes is the actual APIs that implement the volumes on the other side, the storage on the other side. Boy, so this is actually one of the challenges for this. I believe it is. Yes, it's the other side of glance on the compute side. So the best thing to do is to actually go back to the spreadsheet. Let me see if I can find it. I think I have it up. And look at the actual tests that we block into this. Hold on a second, which we have. I'll bring up that. We're building a JSON file that will have exactly what the tests are for each capability, which we know is a gap. So. Yeah, go ahead. Images V1 and V2. So the challenge they do, and there's a really interesting challenge we've seen for this, is that the DefCore scoring is weighted towards what is used and what people are relying on in the field, not as much towards technical direction. Technical direction is a factor here, but because our goal is interop, there are going to be places like with Images V1 where it's in use, it's widely deployed, and people are counting on it being there. And so it's a great question. We actually struggle with how much do we deprecate, what do we put in core or not in core. And images, we're saying that, yeah, we'd expect a product to support both APIs. That would be right. So, and there's a transition here. So what we're saying is that if you want to be an OpenStack product, we're expecting you to implement this part of the API now. Yes. Now, I will tell you, this is specifically the question that we're trying to address right now. Go ahead, finish asking your question. So this is so this is you're hitting what is the crux question of DefCore in a lot of ways, and forced us to go down this process. So in scoring, we found that that based on these criteria, which will come up independently of looking at individual criteria, individual capabilities, we found that the object store, those two capabilities, not all of the object store capabilities, ended up being scoring to be considered in core. And that did two things. One is, you're right, it does say that if you're using an OpenStack cloud and you want to call yourself an OpenStack cloud, you must offer Swift compatible APIs. The thing that gets a little bit sticky is that that doesn't necessarily mean you have to offer Swift. And this is exactly the issue. This is exactly the issue that we're coming to with designated code. Swift is all or nothing. I'm sorry? So that's a great question. So what we did was, when we made the decision that non-admin tests were not admin tests were not included, what I did was, instead of making admin 0, I made it -1. And what that allows us to do is actually rank the admin tests also, and not lose the score. Because what this does is, in the future, I fully expect that we will have a private cloud version of core in which admin tests are required. This isn't, we haven't taken this work up yet, but I fully anticipate that we're going to end up with, here is OpenStack core, and then here is OpenStack core private, or something like that, because you. Sure. Wait, I can't hear you. I lost the voice. There. That's better. Yes. Mm-hmm. Right. So it's a great question. The OpenStack trademarks are being simplified and streamlined by the foundation, and so they are moving to just 2 trademarks: OpenStack powered and OpenStack compatible. And the OpenStack powered, this will specifically address OpenStack powered, and OpenStack powered will require you to comply with this. OpenStack compatible is a little bit fuzzier, and I suspect will ultimately transform into 2 marks. And here's why. One variant of OpenStack compatible is about drivers and plugins, where you can say the Cinder driver is OpenStack compatible. That's its first use. And what we would expect is that you wouldn't break core by using a driver. There's actually a component in the principles around that. But when you get OpenStack compatible, it's really a different statement around being part of the CI or other testing. There's a future mark that we have intentionally not tried to define yet, which says that you pass all the capabilities but don't include the code, where you're API compatible. That mark is very controversial, and we don't have a consensus view on it. So I do know there's a potential that we would use API compatible to mean things that are API, don't include the OpenStack code, but that is not decided yet. Bingo. Because we're focused on interoperability. Mm-hmm. Yes. Oh, sorry, I should have left it up on screen. I thought you were going someplace else. Yes, that's exactly right. All or nothing. And that, so that, okay. And so if I started bringing up this JSON file, I did. This one's going to change a little bit, but fundamentally, oops, this isn't the right one. We're converging the capabilities and tests, but the idea is here is a capability, right. So here's a block tests. Yeah, I'm improving this file based on feedback that we got from the community. But it says here is a capability, and then here's the tests that you must pass for it. One of the changes that we're making is we expect that the PTLs and the technical community will actually control which tests are in which capabilities, and hopefully provide more descriptive names and actual descriptions of that capability, because that's much more usable. And since that's really a project thing, what we're doing is we're going to allow the DefCore committee to hear vendors who think certain tests should be removed from that list, or what we're calling is flagged, out. And that, because what happens is we're seeing exponential growth of tests. What we fully expect is between Icehouse and Juno, tests will be added into Nova that some vendors don't pass. And it could be that they're great tests for the gate, but they don't make sense for the broader community. So we want the tests and the capability, but we're going to allow a relief valve for vendors to come through DefCore and say, hey, this test doesn't make sense in the field. Good. There's I don't think we have it online yet, but we will have some views of it that do it, and then you should be able to drill down into the specific test and see the test. But I will tell you that this file is up to date. I'll put the link in the chat. This file does reflect the grid that I'm showing. So if you actually had a question about this this capability, you could look up the test. Minus one of the big changes we're making is to qualify the test names so that they're easier to locate. Correct. And David, who's speaking, is PTL of RefStack, which is the project that is running the implementation of DefCore and helping produce these results and collect them. There's provisions in, so let me jump back to, so there's a page here, let me bring it up. This one. So there's a page here where we actually talk through these principles, and one of the key aspects of the principles is that as long as your code is upstreamed, we would consider that designated. So if you're ahead, as long as you're passing the tests, that's fine. So that is fine as long as if it's in a designated section, you've upstreamed it. Yes, that is a key important question. That is exactly right. As long as you're sharing your work, and I like that because that is a very important nuance that is worth having stated. And a lot of what we've done here is we go back as we've gone through this process and make sure that it encourages community behaviors for the project. And one of the things I really like in these community reviews is for people to do exactly what you just did and think through, all right, the implication here is that, you know, somebody's going to be ahead, and are they sharing what they're doing? And are we encouraging the right behavior or not? And we're very careful to take feedback where people say, hey, this doesn't incent the right behavior, and change the process so that we are encouraging community participation by vendors back into the main project and not forking. Sure. Great question. So two things. One is, that's one of the reasons why Keystone is not considered, we're not expecting Keystone to be designated code, because there's a lot of replacements for it. And there are some integration tests for Tempest, and this isn't limited to Tempest in concept. Today it's limited to Tempest just because we're trying to be practical. We would love to see tests come out for performance and scale, and have those added into the community and be part of the community conversation. And a lot of what we hope to drive by being so test focused is that we want to see tests that are broader and deeper for OpenStack come into the community as ways to validate interoperability. I am absolutely certain that some of the test suite we have is not sufficient to really guarantee interoperability. I'm certain of that. I'm hoping that we will have vendors and users and ecosystem partners that create tests that validate, sort of validate interoperable features and bring those into the community. Yes. We're also trying to create, it totally is, and one of the things I've already heard is that vendors are feeling, or sorry, PTLs are feeling more support from vendors now that they know the tests are required to become certified. So it's becoming easier to argue for better test coverage on the projects, test investment. Jump back to the principles. Okay. So yeah, there's quite a bit of detail around the principles and some of those things that are staked out. And then I've actually done some whole hour presentations about the principles earlier on, and I'd suggest people review those things if they want a lot more information about that. I'm happy to answer questions, but I don't want to leave time. So is anything here, I mean, we talked about images V1 and V2. Are there items on this list that strike people as flat out wrong or would be hard to live with? Today it's 1/12. It's very simple, but we left DefCore open to have actually weights. We expect it always to sum to 100, but in the future the board has the option to say that documentation is not, you know, it's not discriminating anything, so we're going to drop it down to a lower weight and make TC feature direction a higher weight. That's an option that we've preserved for the future, but right now it seems to be working without tweaking the weights. Oops, we lost you. Or we lost me. Okay. Okay. Yes, no. Correct. That is good feedback. I wonder why we scored it as widely used. It should have, in that case, it should have failed all three of the shows proven usage model. We'll review that. That's great feedback. No, this is it. You know, we're going through doing a whole bunch of scores, and it's very possible that in review we missed it. It also doesn't have that much test coverage, so we factored that in at times. That's a good catch. Yeah. One of the things that we've done is the board has reserved the right to ignore the scores if we feel like it's necessary, or overrule the scores would be better than ignore. So the scores are guidance, but at the end of the day, the board is actually making the call through recommendation to the DefCore committee. And it's a small note, procedural note. The DefCore committee makes the recommendation as a slate to the board, and the board approves the slate. We do not budget time for the board to argue individual capabilities during meetings. So if you want to participate in this process, the right place to do it is through the DefCore committee meetings. And it's always useful to do it in the front door, but we'll take feedback however. Cool. And I would say the same thing about this list. Please go through the list, and if something doesn't make sense, feel free to bring it up on the DefCore committee mailing list. It's moderated, but if you post a question, I let everybody in. So it's pretty easy to do that. It is. It's. I'll throw the link. Yeah, it's tied off of the. Let's see. I think it's actually this is actually hosted on the wiki. Let's see. Oh, sorry, I know where it is. It's under should be under here somewhere. I'll put the link in. Thank you. I will do that as I get all the way through. Okay. Here's my files. That's funny. So this is you can. I'm sorry? We are beginning to get it as we're starting to get some feedback on how these things go. Correct. Right now, the scoring capabilities have been coordinated by the TC to fill in the missing, the 0.5s. well, the ones in the TC future direction discoverable. So a couple of these categories, I don't think they're taking over the widely deployed ones. We probably need to resolve those in the next couple days. Thank you. That's critical. It's not based on real data. The whole purpose of RefStack is to help us collect this information and actually know on a capability by capability basis which tests are passing in the wild, and then use that information to inform this graph. Awesome. Wow. And that's also another thing that's outlined in this presentation of what we're doing and how we're doing it. All right. Cool. That'd be great. Next Monday. So that's when I give the presentation. Cool. That sounds fun. Right. So that's good. Yeah, and we've been modifying these principles. Yeah, I would expect over time that as we get real data for widely deployed, it becomes we weight that more highly than other things. But without data, it doesn't make sense to me. More questions? No angry rants? Okay, good. When we started this process, that was a very real question. We had plenty of angry rants. I hope so. Yeah, I'm ready to close it if people don't have more questions. Excellent. Well, everybody, thank you for taking some time and participating. If a question comes up, you're welcome to join us in 12 hours when we or 10 when we do this again. And if you have feedback for me that you think would help in the next meeting, just email me, tweet me, however you want to get a hold of me, and I will incorporate it in the next briefing so that we're smoother over time. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.